In today's episode, we are celebrating our 100 episode milestone by assigning superlatives to some of our favorite episodes.
From EngageMint, I'm David Millay, and this is Flip the Switch.
Katie, what is happening? We made it to 100 episodes. How you feeling?
I'm so proud of hitting this milestone, and I'm really excited to recap some of our favorite episodes in this episode of Flip the Switch.
For everybody that has listened to this, and you might have heard Katie on this, I do want to give Katie a massive shout out. She is really a big jack of all trades on our team. She does client work and leads a lot of client relationships for us, but she also jumps in and produces and edits every single podcast episode. So she is an all-around beast, and I got to give some credit. We hit 100 episodes. You've edited like half of these episodes, so I got to give you a shout out for that.
Well, thank you. It has been fun. It is something that has opened my eyes to a lot of different perspectives. It's taught me skills that I never thought that I would ever need or have. But also it's given me a lot of different insights to a lot of different areas that I don't think I would have had if I wasn't involved in this. So credit to you for starting the show and giving us this platform.
That's how I feel about this show. So let's jump in. So we're going to do superlatives today. Like we're back in high school. And we're going to start off with one that is a good way to start the show. Let's start with, what was your most fun episode? And like, what was the qualifications for putting it in there?
The most fun episode to me is ones that have a lot of creativity to them. So naturally, I'm going to jump to Jesse Cole. Some of the things that, first of all, of course, he showed up in his yellow tux. So how could you not, find it fun to be sitting with someone who's in a full-blown yellow tux and yellow top hat? But at the same point in time, I loved the amount of fun that he shared from his team into that episode. Things like they celebrate failures by giving out a burnt chicken award. So they got a really terrible review at one point. It actually changed their entire operation for how they prepared food and beverage. But they celebrate the bad things that happen or the things that are maybe not as fan first with a burnt chicken award. The fact that they don't call their brainstorm sessions or think tanks, it's an idea palooza. So to be able to put that kind of fun into the work, he then brought that fun into the episode.
Yeah, that honestly, that episode was fun for me recording it. And that was early on. So if you're looking for that episode and you're trying to find it, you haven't heard it. That was probably...
We had two. Jesse's one of the few repeats.
I was actually texting with him the other day. He's going to come on again this year. I was like, when's your yearly appearance coming? Because he's got a book coming out in May. But so that episode, I do remember it early on. And I was like, I've been following Jesse on. I think I'm going to give more backstory, and Katie's going to give more info on the clips. That's how I have a feeling this episode's going to go. So, backstory behind that one, I was really kind of like on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I had seen Jesse and I had followed him. I'm like, this guy's got some unique takes. Let's have him on the show. But I didn't know if he was for real.
That's one way to put it.
I didn't know if he was for real, if it was just kind of like a shtick. And we got on the podcast, and I was like, this guy's for real.
Oh, yeah.
They like for real do these crazy things. And like, it is actually impactful. And it was a great learning for me coming out of my Disney days, where everything is, at least in the parks, right? I know Disney gets a rep for being super innovative, but sometimes in the parks, it's an operation, right? So we're focused on operational excellence.
Right.
So we're focused on consistency. We're focused on driving things. So sometimes some of the fun does get taken out of it. And they, trust me, they do a better job than most corporations, if not 99% of corporations, in terms of making things fun. But there is still that level of operational excellence that takes away from the idea paloozas and whatnot.
Right.
So I learned that brought like a lot of my fun kid play out of me, that episode. If you want to go back and check it out, it's early episodes. I don't know what number it is. I don't know what number any of these episodes are. But it's early on in the show.
I think Fan First was 14, back. And then we had another one around 50 when we talked to him about his Thanksgiving Day.
You would know the episode numbers.
I would.
All right. I would say most fun for me, I'm going to say Rachel Jacobson from Drone Racing League. It was just an episode that was like so, I mean, one, she's incredible, but her spirit and her laughter, she came into the episode like just totally, I don't know how this works. Are we doing this right? And like she came into the episode like almost in tears, laughing, just trying to get the system set up. And it set the tone for the whole episode, where even though we were talking about really serious things like how Drone Racing League has become agile and how they partner with corporations and how they segment their fan demos, we were talking about really serious things, but we were laughing the entire time. And it was just, I walked away with from the episode like genuinely with my spirits lifted, ready for the day.
Yes. I mean, the way that she infused her personality into the episode was, and also how she talked about how that personality then goes into the entire corporation. I mean, they work hard, but they play hard and they have a lot of fun. And I mean, just the way that she can tackle getting things done. I loved listening to her talk about, we're going to find something, we're going to go after it. I just remember her talking about finding that their fans were interested in betting. And in 51 days later, they had a relationship with DraftKings.
They move quick over there. And again, I think
fastest the speed of drones was one of her lines.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I do remember my takeaway, my impression from that episode was I was like, man, traditional stick and ball sports and leagues and teams that take 6 months to make a decision, they're screwed because you've got other entertainment options like Drone Racing League that are up and coming that they're moving quick. I mean, finding out that your employees are interested in betting or not your employees, your fans are interested in betting, and then partnering with DraftKings that quick in 50 days, like that would never happen on a big team. All right, cool. Covered most fun. What's the next superlative on the list?
We've hit most fun. So how about the one that taught us the most? Which one taught you the most?
One that taught me the most. Let's see. Why don't you go first on that?
I have to give it to Peter Sorkoff. I think that is the one. So there was times where I was making show notes in the background and taking notes of things. And I think I had 3 pages of notes from that episode. There were so many different things from his perspective of understanding the subconscious and the emotions of fans and why that drives some of their decisions. Some things where it could be perceived as being manipulative. In terms of, we talked about the Emporium and how the windows are lower so that kids can see the toys in the window. And it's not being manipulative, it's being kind to the customer and allowing the customer, the kids who are the ones that are going to be most excited about some of the things in there, it's on their level. So that was one thing that really stood out to me from that episode. The other one was just really set our mindset, I think, on being relational as opposed to being transactional. I think it's something that we always talked about, but this was one that really gave some concrete examples to it, that nobody goes to a baseball game because upper level tickets are $15. It's because it meets one of their 3 needs as a fan. And how do you tap into those things more?
Yeah, Peter's definitely a guy that you talk to him and you're like, what are these concepts? I need a dictionary to listen to hear, to actually decipher and translate what you're saying. Anytime you talk to him, he's on another level of just like intelligence.
His feature of airports went right over my head, but the rest of the episode,
I was loving that part, but I was like, how the heck am I going to tie this back to sports and entertainment?
Exactly.
I would say the episode for me that I learned the most, honestly, any conversation that I have with Nick Lawson. So Nick Lawson, this was an early episode on sponsorship, but it was just really unique to me on his organization's approach to sponsorship and just talking about how digital marketing today works. Now, some of that has slightly changed. I mean, that space around digital marketing and cost of Facebook ads and all that's changing on a regular basis. So some of that information in there has been updated and changed. But in that episode, I mean, his approach to just how teams could be looking at digital marketing and sponsorship, talking about the shift from going from that a CMO at a big organization would have of, hey, yeah, sure, I want the suite with the ribbon boards, going to, well, how is this actually driving me numbers? And can you prove to me that by sponsoring your organization for $100,000, $50,000 is going to drive 4x ROI. And the reality is, traditionally, we can't say that. We can just say, yeah, this many eyeballs looked at it, and we can guess that of those those 100 eyeballs, 3 of them are going to buy your car. But that's not good enough anymore. When on digital, you can quite literally track the exact transactions and get all the contact email for those people, retarget them with more ads. And it's just incredible when you actually sit down and talk with a digital marketing expert. You realize, wow, the game has totally changed from a sponsorship and marketing perspective. And so I think I learned technically the most in that episode, because it was just, he went deep.
Yeah.
So that to me, I think was probably where I learned the most. What episode was that? Do you have that? I mean, it's like early. Go back and check it out, people. We'll put it in the show notes.
We'll have all these linked.
Perfect. All right, let's do most nervous. What episode were you the most nervous going into? Now, you haven't been here for all of them, but you've been here.
No, I haven't been here for all of them.
60 of them. But what episode were you most nervous for?
I think one of the ones I was most nervous for was Scott O'Neill. It's just somebody that is legendary in the space and had been on a number of other podcasts prior to this. His new book had just come out, Be Where Your Feet Are. And I wanted to make sure that one was one that we got something different out of. And I think we did. But it was just one that felt like I'm prepared a lot for that one compared to some of the others.
And for people that are listening that don't know who Scott O'Neill is or haven't listened to the episode, Katie, I mean, you said he's legendary in the space. His titles, kind of give a little of his background.
Yeah. He had been, I think, president of Madison Square Garden, so working with the New York Knicks. He was president of Harris Blitzer Sports Entertainment, so worked with the Devils and the Sixers, and had really made an impact on all of those organizations, which was evident based on how many people shared his book, talked about his book, and what they learned from it. So really powerful, and the impact and the legacy that he left in the sports world.
Yeah, I mean, he's got ownership stake in Elevate, right? I mean,
right.
He's definitely a legend in the space. So having him on was one of the biggest names we've had on for sure. Oddly enough, that was not my most nervous. I would say there's 2 that I had that were most nervous. Both were related to big names. Actually,
you have a lot more pressure because you actually have to ask the questions. I'm just sitting here in the background.
That's fair. I'm gonna get 3 because I want to give a little bit of backstory on one of them. 3 that I was most nervous for. One was Quake Studer, for sure. Quint Studer, we probably did in like the 20s, 30s. If you don't know who Quint Studer is, legend in the customer experience space. Sold his customer experience consulting company for hundreds of millions of dollars in the healthcare world. It's called the Studer Group. And so he has just, and it was more the patient experience, kind of what he focused on. But he owns a minor league baseball team. So we really made a lot of the ties between patient experience and what that's like in the healthcare industry. Emotions are high, right? And margin of error is slim, to the sports space, and how he took what he learned from patient experience and has applied it to his baseball team in the minor leagues. And there were just a lot of really interesting learnings there. But going into that, I knew who Quint was for years and had followed his work. And we had worked with them. I had competed with them in RFPs back when I was at Disney. And so to have him on there, I was like, oh man, like this is pretty cool. Not to mention we were recording and he was at a lake. So I'm like, oh, is the Wi-Fi going to go out? Like, how are we going to have to record this again? And you just hate doing that as an interviewer. You want it to go smooth the first time.
It's the things that people don't see as to when an episode is finally put together, all the work that goes on behind the scenes to make it all happen.
For sure. All right. So that was one. What else was I most nervous for? I was definitely nervous for Jared Spataro. So he's the EVP of Microsoft Teams. In my mind, that is the biggest name that we've had on here. Maybe not the biggest name, but most important. I mean, he reports directly to the CEO of Microsoft. He oversees all of Microsoft Office worldwide and Microsoft's endeavors around creating the future of work. So for me, it was like, that is a guy that is truly driving the future of organizations and how we work digitally and how we work going forward. So to me, that was like, I was pretty nervous going on that show, going on that episode, making sure it was like valuable for him as well.
Well, that was when we pulled from one of our fireside chats, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, we invited him to this fireside chat. I'm like, I got all these leaders in sports on the show. And I'm like, hopefully people show up to this thing, because I just told him that we put him in front of a bunch of leaders. And sure enough, people showed out. So it was great.
You got a good network.
The last one I would say I was nervous for. I was nervous for Lee Cockerell because I was running late. And I'm like, I'm running late to this episode that we have just like an all-time legendary Disney leader. I know he's going to say something about it. Sure enough, he did. Because he was on like 10 minutes earlier
Yes.
than any other guest. He has a window up at Disney for time management, and I'm showing up to our episode like 5 minutes late. Great. Classic. So anyway, those were my most nervous.
But what did you learn the most from those?
What did I learn the most from those episodes? Because
you wouldn't have been nervous if you didn't know that they were going to be impactful.
Yeah, okay, for sure. So I think biggest takeaway from Lee Cockerell was around kind of the newsletter, just communication, how like, and all the things that he did at Disney, right? All the money that he managed, all the park improvements that he made. All he wanted to talk about was culture and how he treated his people and how he developed his people. And to me, when you think about legacy, right? Like, focus on the things that are really important as a leader today, because you're going to look back at your legacy and say, man, I should have done XYZ, right? Think about your legacy today. And it was pretty evident that Lee did that. So that was like a unique spin.
Yeah. I mean, for him to take the time to write the Main Street Diary every single week and make sure that his cast members and operating participants felt like they were part of his organization, despite how big it was. I think the other thing that I really took away from that one was just how much he involved his team. I think he talked about they had a $400 million budget cut after 9/11, but they couldn't cut any staff in order to make up for that deficit. But he turned to the bartenders and the housekeeping and said, where can you save $1 for us? And they were able to make that cut because every single person came up with, every single area came up with some solution that could be a cost-saving benefit to Disney.
On a similar note with Quake Studer, I mean, that's one of the areas where I feel like I learned the most as well, is him tapping into his nurses to say, hey, I want you to be able to do this faster, this one activity faster, your rounds faster. And they're like, well, we can't, we're doing this. And so he challenged them, well, how could we do that? And they found the process that was just slowing them down, this one tedious thing, and they cut it out, and it saved them all, 20 minutes a day or whatever it was. And so that was one of those examples that, to me, like, listening to your people can make your organization more effective and efficient. You just have to ask the right questions and empower them to actually do something about those things that they're telling you.
Yeah, I mean, I think of something simple as like blood pressure cuffs. They needed 6 extra blood pressure cuffs, and it would save each nurse 30 minutes per day. I mean, when you talk about cost savings in your organization, sometimes you do have to spend a little money, but look at the long-term impact. 30 minutes a day per nurse. How much more you can get done in that amount of time?
Incredible. Did I have one more? Oh, and Jared Spataro, you asked what I learned about that one. For me, the biggest takeaway on that one, there was a specific thing that he said about using Microsoft Teams, where he said, while using Microsoft Teams, they're working on technology that will auto-transcribe every meeting and call out people's action items and notes in it using AI. And when you start thinking about the future of work and infusing technology into the workspace, for me, I'm like, do you know how much time that we're talking about? Hours, like hours, and we're talking about full-time role that you're basically eliminating with technology and allowing us to be able to free up that time. Like, that's incredible with something like that. And so when you start thinking about the possibilities of what are our goals, what's slowing us down, what are the friction points in our employee experience, and then you start saying, okay, well, how might we replace those, whether it's with blood cuffs or blood pressure cuffs, or with
Hard to
AI
say before
technology.
the coffee kicks in.
I know. Blood pressure cuffs or AI technology, like whatever it might be, right? There are all kinds of ways to make your employee experience better if you're focused on finding the friction points.
Well, so you started talking about the future of work, which I think is a perfect segue into our next category, most underrated episode. I think you have Steph Smith listed here, who came on to talk about remote work and the future of work, and something that she still talks about to this day. I think she was really ahead of kind of the remote work best practices. But what were your big takeaways from that episode?
All right. I have comments on this episode. I could go on a diatribe on this episode. So for those listening, for some reason, it is one of our least listened to episodes. I don't know why. If you have not listened to the episode, do yourself a favor and go listen to it. It was one of my favorite episodes, and it just didn't get the play. So Steph is the head of an organization called Trends. Actually, I don't know if she's actually fully in that role now, but she works for The Hustle, which was acquired by HubSpot. And Trends is the kind of premium content product. So they're constantly diving into Google Analytics, finding what people are searching for, then creating business ideas based around those. Really cool organization and really cool content that her group creates. So she's just got all this unique insight into consumer behavior, what people are looking for, but she's worked remotely for like the last 10 years. And so she, and done that from like Bangladesh and all over the world. So with that being said, she just has so many unique principles and heuristics for employee experience and for driving culture. So to me, like one of the biggest things that stood out for me, this was like a single line that really stood out, was this concept of hiring givers versus takers, and a way to evaluate that by asking how like, I think the exact question was something along the lines of, in your interview process, putting people through this and saying, tell me about 3 people whose career that you've impacted the most. And a giver will say people that are underneath them, people that they've helped place in new jobs, people that have underneath them been and gotten promoted higher to them that they've worked for at some point, right? That's what a giver answer would say. And you want givers in your organization because they're going to help out on other projects. They're going to jump in. They're going to be a team player. But what you want to avoid is a taker who would say something along the lines of, when you ask the question, tell me 3 people that you've impacted their career, they're going to try to name drop. They're going to try to give bigger people's names that are in the organization, their bosses or whatnot, because they're in it for the clout. They're in it to climb. They're in it to do the different things. And so when you think about, especially in today's world where collaboration is key, where you can't always tell what people are doing in the office because it's hybrid, you need more givers than takers. And so that line and framework, I mean, that has changed how I hire, how we interview and everything. So yeah, go listen to that episode. That was my most underrated episode. What about
The
yours?
other thing I love about that one too is talking about how to help your manager best manage you. So Steph has a personal manual that her template is online. You can go and she's like, go ahead and rip it. Go ahead and add your spin to this. But it's like, these are some of the things that I want you to know about me that would help you better lead me and how I can better understand than your style too. But I mean, it's something as simple as like favorite food is soup, like, you know, just something that I think when it all comes back to, you know, showing appreciation for your staff. Like if your manager knows your favorite food is soup, they can get you soup for lunch one day, or they get you a Panera gift card for knowing that was probably going to be used towards soup. That I think some of those kinds of things of like helping your manager figure out how to manage you is really powerful.
Love it. Yeah. And she's episode like 50, 51 for those
Episode
of you,
50. That was a good
exactly
milestone
50.
one too.
Yeah, I remember that. Nice. My memory hasn't failed me yet. All right, cool. Well, let's go into, or did you have a different underrated episode?
No, I think that one is one for me too.
All right.
That
perfect.
we reference a lot.
All right. Most personal connection or like special episode for you?
Most personal. I think
I can give my, I can give mine
say,
install.
you've got a little bit more personal connections to some of these than me.
All right, cool. My most special personal connection one. We did 2 episodes with my dad right around the time of when sports started kicking back up at ESPN Wide World of Sports, and my dad ran ESPN Wide World of Sports for 20 years. He was the longest tenured executive there ever. I think he was there 20 years. So that episode was just really interesting. One, because it was timely, because sports were coming back and they were all being played. You know, NBA, MLS were all being played down at Disney. But 2, it was just really interesting getting to hear him from that perspective, getting to hear some of the personal stories behind the scenes at work that I maybe didn't understand at the time or hadn't heard before. That was just a really special episode for me, getting to interview my dad.
I think the one that we did with Rob Temple and Rick Jones, so part of our sister company, Fishbait Solutions, and it was really interesting to hear some of the backstories. Rob had just been appointed CEO of Fishbait Solutions, an organization that Rick had led for a while. Rick was moving into the chief creative officer role, and it was really powerful to hear the relationship, how long that they've been working together behind the scenes for that to come together. But just some of the stories about things that Rob had been able to do in his life with ESPN and working in sponsorship prior to joining Fishbait, I think was really powerful for me.
Perfect. All right, let's jump into let's do some single lines or statements, frameworks that have really impacted you the most.
So my first one is going to be with Nick Sautner. So the reason I came across him was because he had just won an award for an experience. So they created Stadium Glamping. And it is STAYDIUM glamping. And so they created these domes that you could stay in the stadium. You use the locker room. They worked with all their corporate sponsors like Samsung to be able to outfit these. So they basically created an Airbnb space in the stadium to create this once in a lifetime experience. And so that was the reason why we brought him on the show. But one of the things that we learned throughout the process is he has this incredible quote that said, "People describe stadiums as cathedrals of the 21st century, but I think of them more like town halls. They should be somewhere that local residents can use and engage with all year round, not huge spaces that are locked down after a match day." And for organizations who are sitting there going, we've got this huge structure that we use for 7 Saturdays in the fall, 8 if we're lucky. How else do we maximize this building? And there are so many different ideas, from the Powerade G9 golf simulation that they do versus they use their parking lot as community spaces. There were so many different ideas as to how to better build a community. And that's exactly what they did. They built a community with the neighborhood around the stadium, which is how they've been able to add new experiences like concerts this year.
That episode was fantastic. And more context, Nick's Stadium was the first stadium in the world to open back up post-pandemic in New Zealand. So that was just like a really cool, first, if you will, kind of accolade to add to the show. But I totally agree. I mean, that whole concept to me is something that it was very validating, I guess, because we've been talking about that for a while, because we run into issues all the time where you're working with a team, you're working with a stadium, we're trying to recommend certain customer experience upgrades and certain strategies, but it's limited because the infrastructure is not there. And quite honestly, it doesn't make sense to invest in the infrastructure because they're only doing 7 events a year there. And so when you think about it from that perspective, if you can make your cathedral a town hall of the community, you can justify spending a lot more money because you're going to have more opportunities to drive revenue. And ultimately the fan wins, the community members win at the end of the day when you're doing that. And it's just a totally different way of looking at stadiums and arenas than the way that we looked about them 20 years ago.
And we saw some teams get really creative during the pandemic. Like we've talked about Quint's minor league team. I know the Pensacola Wahoos turned their stadium into an Airbnb. You saw a lot of other places that are like, hey, you need somewhere other than your kitchen table to work, come rent out a suite. And we're turning all of our suites into personal offices. You now can work at home plate. So those were some of the things that I think the sports industry really learned during the pandemic, but would love to see continued, even though sports are back.
Yeah, the tough thing for me is like I don't know how many P&Ls have been run around that, where like for people that were doing innovative things like that and then just stopped. And it's like, well, what if you just were you making enough money to be able to hire somebody to continue doing that full time? Or like
Right.
you don't want to put extra stress on your current people because events are back. And it's like, okay, well, maybe make an investment there. I don't know. Everybody's different. You'd have to look at the actual P&Ls. All right. We got any other ones? Any other good single lines?
I've got a couple, so I'll try to run through them rapid fire. So there was one with Stephen Van Bellingham that he talked about what would joy do, and this stood out to me because of the Disney, obviously. So looking at Disney's Inside Out, he said, our brain is programmed that we have 4 negative emotions. So fear, anger, sadness, and disgust. are all negative emotions that we have, but we have only one joy. And so joy has to work so much harder to overcompensate for the 4 negative emotions. And so anytime that you're facing something negative, thinking along the lines of what would joy do? How can you overcome that? But just understanding the fact that that's one of the reasons why you hear so many complaints is that we have more negative emotions than we have positive emotions, and the positive has to work so much harder.
That was a great line by Steven. And what episode was Steven like in the hierarchy if people are going back to search for that episode?
I think that one was in the 60s.
In the 60s, yeah. And if you haven't listened to that episode, it was all kind of about like the future of CX and what innovation could be driving to help us connect with customers better. But he had a lot of interesting frameworks and heuristics in that episode.
So the other two, Barry
Yeah.
Jacobson, absolutely loved his episode. For someone who worked in premium service, so he had worked for a lot of the higher end areas of Disney, fairy tale weddings, conventions, had managed the Disney's Golden Oak community, had also helped with Legends with the Cowboy Stadium the first year the AT&T Stadium opened. But one thing that I really liked about the episode is that he said premium service doesn't always require a premium price, just personalized efforts. So something as simple as there was the lady who was always complaining that her toast was cold. So he moved her table next to an outlet and they put the toaster at her table. That does not cost you any money. And you have somebody who is extremely happy that she has hot toast to eat for breakfast. And he said, there's no other way that you could have done that. Like, it doesn't matter how quickly you put a lid on it. You can't blame the kitchen. Toast gets cold. So you're just going to make it hot at the table. They had somebody else that really liked crab legs. They got those brought over from Disney's Yacht and Beach Club, but they personalized the bib. And it was a $7 bib as opposed to the 30-cent plastic one. But that really had an impact. It was $7. So when you think about the things that you have to do to deliver premium service, it doesn't always require a premium price.
That episode was great because hopefully that episode to me showed other people that yes, Disney has tons of money. Everyone still has a budget at Disney.
Yes.
And so but we're still expected to drive like these great customer experiences. And oftentimes the way to do that is with personalization, right? Make somebody feel like you just created that moment for them and actually create that moment just for them. But that can scale if you're not, there are ways that can scale. And Barry highlighted a number of stories on how to make that scale. And that was what was like really powerful for me.
And my final one, so we had Shep Hyken, who is a chief amazement officer, runs his own customer experience consulting group, and talked about the shortest customer service speech he ever gave. So he was at a conference and his time was supposed to be 45 minutes. Well, the guy in front of him kept running longer and longer and longer. And they're like, you have to be done at this time. And so by the time the guy in front of him finished, he had 2 minutes. And he said, you know what? I'm going to stick to my 2 minutes. Just be nice. And as we're recording this, today is National Random Acts of Kindness Day. And then to me, what I think is powerful is that customer service can just be random acts of kindness. Like, you don't have to put together this humongous plan. It just starts with doing one nice thing for one customer. Dan Genghis had a show yesterday that he was another guest of ours, hit his 100th episode, and he had 21 people that came on to tell their favorite customer experience story. They were not profound. Oh, these were the whole programs that companies put in place. It was things that those companies did for one person. And they were on a show talking about it. So I think that's one thing to think about with customer experience is that you don't have to go and create this whole program. It helps, but just understanding that it starts with one.
Awesome. All right. We've got a couple more questions. We're running a little long here. So let's speed it and hit through it. I guess piece of advice that really sticks with you, we kind of covered that in some of these lines. But any other pieces of advice that really stick with you? I actually, the way I framed the question, everybody on the Google Doc that Katie and I share was, what's the piece of advice that really sticks with you that you don't do? And I mean, maybe we stick with that. Let's stick with that.
So I would say the one for me, we had Troy Dannon, who is the AD at Tulane, is one of our college leaders. And one of the things that he talked about is if he is driving in the car he drives in silence and he just scenario plans. And he was talking about how he had driven to a lake somewhere in the Midwest, and it was a 15-hour drive from New Orleans, and he drove in silence. And to me, like, I can't go more than 15 minutes in working in complete silence. I always have some background music on. Even if it's instrumental, I have something on. I don't know how you could sit for 15 hours and be in your own thoughts. I can't be in my own thoughts that long. I don't know about you. But that one to me is just one that I will never, ever be able to implement. I'm impressed, but I will never be able to implement.
It's funny because that is a piece of advice that also sticks with me. I was driving the other day and I was like, maybe I should just turn the music off and be like Troy and just like contemplate on this day. But I didn't. I put it on podcast at double speed and just blazed through.
Of course.
The other piece of advice that really sticks with me that I don't do, we're going to throw it back to Jesse Cole. So Jesse has instilled this habit in himself and in all of his employees where everybody kind of starts the day off by writing a thank you card. Could be to a fan, could be to another employee, could be to a personal friend, but it's always starting the morning with gratitude with a thank you card. I went out and bought a bunch of EngageMint thank you letters. So because I was like, man, that's a great habit. I'm all about gratitude. Like, let's do it. I think I've written like 5 or 6, and I always I got them sitting on the corner of my desk, and I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I got to go work on that project I was trying to finish. And I never get to those dang thank you cards, but one day I will incorporate that in.
All right. So I think to wrap us, we should talk about the episode that we reference the most because we have not hit on that one yet. And that one has to be Zoe Stamen. That is the one that we reference more often than any other episode. So why is it that one stands out to you the most?
What number episode was that? Just so people have it.
57.
57. Yeah, it was a good stretch of episodes right there in the 50s. Yeah, it's hands down my favorite episode. In the last 2 years, I would say she's probably been the most influential thought leader for me in terms of how I think about things and how I think about engaging customers. What does that look like in the future with Web3 and NFTs? I mean, like, I doubt that I would have gotten into NFTs to the extent of which I'm into it now and we're into it, if it weren't for her constant tweets and her coming on the episode. So there are a few things about that episode specifically that stood out to me. One of those was just how she thinks about engaging fans and expanding the circle of fans based on tangential interests. So thinking about it as if you're an NBA, if you haven't listened to this episode, you absolutely should go listen to it, but I'll give you a little preview of some of the things she talks about. So for an NBA fan, looking at, okay, for one interest that a lot of NBA fans have might be sneakers. So how can we start making more sneaker specific content to pull in other sneakerheads that might not be a fan of the NBA right now, right? Or so you're not going off base and just like totally picking something random like interior design and saying, okay, as the NBA, how can we create more interior design content? You want to take something that is already a core interest of your fans, but then you want to go directly target that type of content and start making that type of content to pull in everybody else that's in that content that isn't necessarily a fan of your organization. So that was one concept specifically that really stood out to me. I know you had a few as well.
Yeah, I mean, the way she redefined fandom for me, I think in the sports world, we often think of your diehard fans as the ones who, and not to take away from their loyalty to your organization, but it's not just the ones who show up to all 7 Saturdays in the fall and attend your games. The way that she broke down and the analogy with Marvel, they're participative. And so they'll watch the game, and that's it. Well, then you have ones who are actively interested, and they're the ones that are buying the merch and buying all of the other products that help promote your brand. And then it's ones who get really into sharing stories or talking about the relationships that they have formed in, conversations with student athletes after games and autograph sessions, and they're helping to build the brand of the student athletes as well. I think those are some of the things that to look at your fandom a little bit differently, and it's not just the ones who have their face painted. and come decked out in a costume to your games, per se. It really changed my perspective on what a fan is and what fandom is.
Yeah, that episode is chock full of good stuff. A lot of things that you're also probably gonna have to look up.
I had more show notes. I added more links to that show notes than I think any other episode that we've done.
Yeah, she's incredible. Go follow her on Twitter at Zoe Skaman, SCAMAN. I think it will really change your ideas and perspective about where customer experience and fandom is going in the future and what your organization can do about it. Yeah. Anything else? Any other ways we want to wrap up here?
I think we've covered all of our favorite episodes. I think we've hit on a lot of the ways that it has influenced the way it makes us think, and hopefully it has had the same impact on all of our listeners, that there's something that you can take away and apply to your organization every single day, because it has for us. So if there's topics you want us to hit on, let us know. We'll find the guest.
All right. On that note, if you've made it this far, I guess we can give you a sneak preview of episodes coming up. Katie, what episode are you most excited about that is scheduled and on the books?
So I am excited. I know you're excited about this one. We just recorded one with John Rossman, and I am so pumped for that one to come out. Again, it's another one where, I was taking pages of notes on the side, and there are so many different insights from that one, but I won't steal your thunder. I know that one's your favorite. So
yeah, what the heck? You stole mine. That was he just has written one of my all-time favorite books. I think it's an episode that's chock full of information for you. You're not going to want to miss that episode. But any other ones that are on the books that are awesome?
So one of the articles that we've been highlighting from the Great Resignation was about an organization indebted that moved to a 4-day, 32-hour work week, and how they've made it work on a global scale. So we have the CEO, Josh Foreman, who is going to come on, and I am really excited about that one to figure out how they went through the whole process. They piloted the whole program and recently implemented it. And I can't wait to figure out how somebody who has actually gone through the 4-day work week is making it work.
Love it. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in to 100 episodes. We're so glad that we're continuing to do the show. I mean, can't do it without y'all's support, without y'all continuing to tuning in, listening, sharing with your friends. So from the bottom of both Katie and I's heart, thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to 100 more.